1,700 years before Jesus, God commanded Abraham to move to the promised land, the land of Israel. God said, "I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. As for me and my house, we will bless Israel." So, Abraham had two children, Ishmael from his Egyptian servant Hagar, and Isaac, the promised child, from his wife Sarah. Ishmael was cast away by a jealous Sarah, and he became the father of the Arabs. So, Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob had 12 children who became the 12 tribes of Israel. Time went on, and Israel fell into a famine, and they ended up as slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Finally, God chose Moses to, quote, "set my people free." So after the plagues, he parted the sea, spent 40 years in the Sinai, and received the 10 Commandments. Then for the next 800 years, Israel lived under their own judges and kings. Then, in 587 BC, Israel was taken captive by the Babylonians. 48 years later, the Persians defeated the Babylonians, and the Jews were allowed to move back to Israel. Then, in the 3rd century BC, the Persian Empire was toppled by the Greeks. In 63 BC, the Romans captured Jerusalem and then mocked the Jews by changing the name of Israel to Palestine after the Philistines, a people who had been extinct for 500 years. In 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the temple and the Jews were scattered amongst the nations, fulfilling the prophecy in Deuteronomy, "The Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth to the other." In 687, after the Muslims conquered Israel, they built the Dome of the Rock on the site of the old Jewish temple. In the 1st and 2nd century, the Crusaders fought back and forth with the Muslims over Israel. For 400 years prior to World War II, the Ottomans ruled over Israel. Then, by the mid-1800s, Jews once again were moving back to Israel in large numbers. Soon thereafter, the pogroms in Russia killed thousands of Jews. In 1897, Theodor Herzl inspired the modern-day Zionist movement, the desire for a Jewish nation in Israel. In 1916, a chemist named Chaim Weizmann saved Great Britain by inventing a new way to produce acetone. This helped defeat Germany in World War I. When asked by Lord Balfour what Chaim wanted in return, Weizmann said, "A national homeland for my people." This led to the Balfour Declaration of 1917 that declared the British government favors the establishment of a national homeland for the Jewish people. In 1922, Great Britain took control of Israel away from the Turks and created borders for the re-establishment of a Jewish nation in the Promised Land, the British Mandate. Around that same time in Russia, another 250,000 Jews were slaughtered. For the next 20 years, Jews continued to immigrate to Israel, but were met with bloody resistance. Simultaneously, Great Britain was hindering the return of the Jews to Israel. In November of 1938, Kristallnacht, known as the Night of Broken Glass, happened in Germany, and most Jewish businesses and synagogues were vandalized and or burned. And 30,000 Jews were taken to concentration camps. This was the beginning of the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were subsequently murdered. Astonishingly, Great Britain continued to hinder Jewish refugees from immigrating to Israel. After World War II, Israeli Jews were continuously being terrorized and murdered by neighboring Arab nations. Finally, on May 14, 1948, the League of Nations voted to make Israel a Jewish national homeland. The very next day, Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and Jordan attacked Israel with the backing of Saudi Arabia. Israel won the War of Independence, but the Jordanian military, with British help, occupied Jerusalem and took control over Judah and Samaria and changed its name to the West Bank. After the Arab invasion, the world never referred to their gains as occupied territory. After that, the Middle East nations had a tantrum and expelled nearly 1 million Jews from all of their lands, and tiny Israel absorbed much of these Jewish refugees. From 1948 to 1967, Syria continued to attack Israel by firing missiles at Jewish farmers from the Golan Heights and committing numerous acts of terror, while their very own people were moving to Israel by the thousands to find work. In 1967, the Egyptian, Jordanian, and Syrian armies marched to the border of Israel, preparing to attack. In a preemptive strike, Israel destroyed the Egyptian Air Force, took the Golan Heights from Syria and Sinai from Egypt, and won back parts of the Jerusalem and West Bank from Jordan. Then in 1973, Israel was attacked on Yom Kippur, and the world opinion was silent. Not until a few days later, when the Jews gained the upper hand, did the world call for a ceasefire. Things have not gotten much better since then. The Nobel Peace recipient Yasser Arafat led 2 intifadas against Israel. Iran uses Hezbollah and Hamas as proxies to attack Israel. In 2005, Israel pulled the remaining Jews out of Gaza, and Hamas responded by firing 6,000 rockets into Israel. The world stood silent until Israel responded. Then they erupted. It seems to me that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Not for me. As for me and my house, we will stand with Israel.